Budget Committee was to have meetings during the day for those that could attend during the day, but also have evening sessions for those that work and have work obligations during the workday, but wanted to participate in the evening. We're trying to accommodate residents to make sure their voice is heard. We had a budget town hall last night, which over 7,000 Brampton residents participated on. We did some survey questions. I think we're going to share those tomorrow morning. We can anticipate they'd be ready tonight, but we'll make sure we get them tomorrow. We've got a number of items on the agenda, including one item we didn't get to yesterday, so we're going to start with that item, which is item 4.2, the City of Brampton Community Satisfaction Survey from Gary Milakovic from Forum Research. So Gary, if I could call you up to start things off.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. My name is Gary Milakovic, and I'm the Communications Coordinator for Forum Research and one of the people who worked on your Community Satisfaction Report. I'm joined with my colleague Sarah Lamb, who is a Research Analyst with Forum. In 2019, we were commissioned to undertake a community research program for the City of Brampton, which included a telephone survey and 2 focus groups. Ultimately, the goal was to provide council insights into resident opinions onto key performance indicators and to help inform the budget deliberations you're holding tonight. I would like to briefly describe the methodology that we undertook for this research program before beginning. So the survey was taken amongst those 18 years of age or older, and they were residents of Brampton. It was taken at the end of August and throughout the month of September. It was undertaken by telephone using live interviewers only, and the sample size was 1,101, which results in a margin of error of plus or minus 2.95%. This telephone survey was undertaken using a random digit dial, which means residents of Brampton were randomly contacted by us. Throughout this survey, you may notice numbers that add up to 99 or 101. That's not a mistake. Numbers are rounded and may not add up to 100, and I just wanted to make sure I presented that to you to start. As well, you might see something identified as top 2 or bottom 2. This is a traditional technique we use in market research to identify overall satisfaction. So for example, if a positive scale included very satisfied and somewhat satisfied, those would be considered the top 2 positive results, and we might combine those into a top 2 result and call that satisfied. Similarly, bottom 2 would be somewhat dissatisfied and very dissatisfied, and we would refer to that as dissatisfied. Also want to note that in some of the data visualizations we're including, that people who said don't know or prefer not to say were excluded to ensure that the results were as accurate as possible. Briefly talking about the focus groups, we held 2 of them here at City Hall in October of 2019. Each lasted about 2 hours, and once again they were held with residents of Brampton who are 18 years of age or older. Overall, about 2/3 of residents of Brampton say quality of life in the city is good. About 4 in 10 say it has become worse over the past 3 years. But 3/4 are satisfied with the services that are provided with the city, which is a similar result to the results that were had in 2015, but I do want to note that those very satisfied actually increased slightly over 2015 by 4%. 1/4 of the people we spoke to said that the most important local issue that Brampton should address is related to crime, safety, or policing. And this was a concern which was actually echoed in our focus groups quite strongly as well. In general, residents of Brampton are satisfied with many of the services you provide, and will go into detail shortly. Of those residents of Brampton who've contacted the city in the past 12 months, residents are most satisfied with the staff that provided the service. In regard to spending and taxes, 3/4 are satisfied with the value for their tax dollars, with the top two saying that they receive good value for their tax dollars. About half say that they would prefer the city adjust taxes to maintain the services as to where they are today. As to how to pay for municipal programs and services, residents were split. They were provided the option as to whether it should be paid for through general tax revenues or through user fees, and it was 51-49. Briefly, the high-level results of the focus groups centered around 3 issues: crime and public safety, transportation, and cost of living. Some participants noted that they feel less safe in Brampton over the past few years, and it's having a direct effect on their quality of life. Traffic and congestion was also noted as an issue, and particularly communication around construction projects and road closures was identified as an issue. Some participants felt as though they were not provided enough information about the projects that were upcoming. Cost of living was identified as an issue, as well as high insurance rates and taxes in general. We'll go specifically into some of the results that we found now. So during the focus groups, we conducted a brainstorming exercise. It was the first brainstorming exercise that we took during the focus groups. And we asked residents what their first thought was when they heard the word Brampton. This word cloud identifies some of those thoughts. The larger a word is in this word cloud, the more times it was mentioned by respondents. So as you can see, multicultural is the most mentioned word. High insurance and traffic came in as well. So multicultural was very strongly represented, as were high insurance and traffic. Looking specifically now at the quality of life scores, as I said, about 2/3, 61%, said they're satisfied with the quality of life. They said it is either excellent or good, and about 40% said it was fair or poor. Something we've seen in the past few months with municipal research is that generally people are saying that their quality of life is becoming worse rather than better. So as you can see here, 42% say that over the past 3 years their quality of life has become worse, but it is something that we are seeing in some of our other municipal research, that the score has gone up over the past few months. Looking at quality of life, some of the issues that people mentioned were expensive city to live in, and crime is negatively affecting them. But others mentioned that recreation facilities were a positive, and it makes their raising children much easier and more enjoyable in the city. One thing that was identified as a highlight is that investments in commuting infrastructure, particularly Zoom was identified as a valuable service, were seen very positively amongst respondents in the focus groups. But they did note that traffic and congestion is an issue for them still. Overall, satisfaction with services delivered by the city has remained steady since 2015, and it was 74% in 2015, and in 2019 we see it at 73%. But as I noted, those who said they're very satisfied has increased by 4%, which is outside the margin of error, so it is notable. Only about 1 in 10, so about 13%, said they're dissatisfied. Looking at the most important local problem, we provided residents the opportunity to tell us what they thought the most important local problem was. 26% said it was public safety, crime, or policing. 16% said traffic and congestion. Those are the two main issues by far. As you can see, public transit, housing and the cost of housing, auto insurance rates, etc., are clustered behind those two issues, but they're within the margin of error, so they're very close together. Traffic and congestion scores at about 16% is roughly similar to what was seen in 2015, as it was 20%. But in 2015, only 2% said crime was the most important local issue facing Brampton. Now, because of differences in coding, the results are not directly correlated, but obviously crime, safety, and policing has gone up considerably since then, regardless of the differences in coding. We asked again during the focus groups to create another brainstorming exercise asking the top local issue, and the top local issue that we saw in the telephone survey was echoed in the focus groups. So as you can see here, crime and traffic are the two major issues, and cost of living as well is one of the major issues, with a few other mentions of healthcare and taxes. Some of the issues that were identified during the focus groups were a diminishing downtown core, homelessness, but again, traffic congestion, crime and safety, and cost of living and taxes. Some of the features that residents were most proud of, we once again gave them the opportunity to tell us some of the features of the city that they are most proud of. Almost a third said it's Brampton's parks and naturalized areas. Almost 1/5 said it was public transit. And about 1 in 10 said it was the quality of roads and street cleanliness. In 2015, we saw a similar ratio. Parks and naturalized areas were rated highly, as were public transit and recreation and sports centers, which wasn't in the top 3 this time. I'll pass the slides over to my colleague Sarah, who will continue the presentation.
So in the following slides, we'll be talking about Brampton residents' satisfaction levels for various services provided by the city. The first few are administrative services. So as you can see here, for the most part, the majority of Brampton residents are satisfied with a variety of administrative services provided by the city. The most satisfied being buying theater tickets, so 90% of residents are satisfied for that. And then going to the very right, the least satisfied paying bylaw infraction tickets, with 68% being satisfied there. Compared to the 2015 data results, in general, all of these services have increased in terms of levels of satisfaction. Moving on to emergency services and enforcement. We asked them questions on satisfaction for emergency fire services, which 76% say that they are satisfied, compared to 64% for bylaw enforcement. And compared to 2015, emergency fire services did decrease a little bit from 88% to 76%. However, for bylaw enforcement, it did increase from 61% to 64%. From the focus groups, one individual did make a comment saying, more proactive enforcement. People are complaining to the city, but once you know which areas are common locations for bylaw concerns, then hang around those areas more often. Also, if an officer is driving up the street and notices a violation, they should enforce them right away. Maybe a website where you can submit the issue and an officer will follow up. Looking at the recreation opportunities being provided by the city. So again, in general, the majority of Brampton residents are satisfied in these various areas. They're most satisfied with convenience of the location of recreation facilities, with 78% being satisfied here. And then on the lower end is the recreational programs itself, with 68% being satisfied. Comparing it back to the 2015 data, we can only compare the recreational programs just due to coding differences. However, you do see that there was a slight decrease here from 79% in 2015 to 68% in 2019, the most recent year. And then moving on to public works and infrastructure services. Again, the majority are saying that they are satisfied, with the highest being 81%, which is maintenance of parks and open spaces, and the lowest being at 58%, which is road safety. And overall, compared to the previous wave that we did in 2015, city roads and sidewalk maintenance, it has increased from 64% to 70%. Now, this, coming from the focus groups, generally, the individuals did say that the city is doing well in terms of providing services for them, and they actually noted a few areas where you guys are doing particularly strong in, which includes garbage, parks and recreation, water quality, and also the 311 service. However, they also mentioned some rooms for improvement. So these includes areas such as bylaw enforcement, snow removal, public engagement, overcrowding on transit, and some aspects of garbage collection and city cleanliness. For example, one individual did say, the recent speed limit reduction, no one is obeying the speed limits to the point the money being used for the signs is wasteful. It's also dangerous for people who decide to follow the new limit while others don't follow these rules. Now moving on to communication and engagement. Now, this question was only asked for individuals who have actually contacted the city of Brampton within the past 12 months. So that ranges around 460 people roughly. So in terms of interacting with the city, they're most satisfied with the staff that provided the service. So 77% say they are satisfied, and the lower end being the amount of time it took to get the service, with only 69% saying that they are satisfied. Now moving on to spending and taxes. As mentioned previously, over 3/4, so 77%, are saying that they feel that they are getting good value for their tax dollars. So about 1/4 are saying that it's actually a very good value. From the focus groups, there are some mixed perceptions on taxes in Brampton relative to their neighbors. So some felt that it was higher across the board, some felt that it was higher in some areas and lower than other areas. And then they also noted that while it's higher in some other, it's higher here, in other municipalities it actually shows that it's lower tax dollars there, for example, in their road conditions. And one individual said, comparing it to a lot of communities in the GTA, Brampton, I hate to say it, but it's reasonable. And then looking at balancing the taxation and cost of delivering services, as you can see, the majority of them do say that they would rather adjust taxes in order to maintain the services where they are today. And only 12% say that they would like to increase taxes to expand or improve on the services. Now looking at the tax revenues and spending, as you can see here, the respondents from the survey, they were pretty split on how to pay for these programs and services offered by the city. So 51% say that the municipal services and programs should be paid for by everyone through general tax revenues. However, 49% say that these municipal programs and services should be paid for by those who use it through user fees. So a quote from one individual from the focus groups, programs and services should be funded by general taxes. If the onus is on the government, they will come up with the correct amount for a project right away. User fees, they just seem to increase, and when the services drop off, they continue. And then moving on to the question about the city's ability to manage spending in the last 2 years, the majority, 57%, say that it stayed the same. Now looking at more closely at what some individuals said from the focus groups, participants from focus groups, they were pretty divided on whether the city spending has gotten better or worse. Some say that it's gotten worse, but some did note that the confidence in the current council is a lot greater compared to the previous council. So for example, one participant noted, there does appear to be more local councilors with better education behind them. There seems to be a more variety of skill base in this particular council. Kind of similar to the survey results, most people do want to cut back on taxes while improving services. However, if that's not possible, they do understand that increasing taxes just slightly to maintain services are their preferred method. And from the focus groups, people do think that general taxes would be the way to go for funding the programs and services offered by the city. Next, I'll be talking about some of the drivers that impact quality of life in Brampton. Now, in this section, we examined overall quality of life in Brampton to uncover potential strengths and weaknesses and areas for improvement for Brampton. So we looked at various factors to examine their level of impact on overall quality of life in Brampton. And then we further compared these level of impact on their stated satisfaction. So their satisfaction levels that they reported in the survey. And then by comparing these, we can actually see which factors have the greatest impact on quality of life in Brampton, but it also tells us how well Brampton is currently doing in these factors. So over here you can see a chart grouped into 4 different quadrants. So the first green one is successes. So as you can see on the x-axis, it's the stated level of satisfaction, which is basically your performance, current performance in these areas. And then in the y vertical axis is the level of impact. And so it's how much it's driving quality of life. And so when we plot these onto the graph, we have the successes, which means that you're doing really well, people are really satisfied in this factor, and it also has a high level of impact on quality of life, which means that these should be monitored and maintained. Right below that is the secondary attributes. So these are factors that are getting high levels of satisfaction, they're performing well. However, the impact on quality of life is a little bit lower. So while this is still a good thing, you should still maintain it, it's not a top priority. However, looking at the targets in the upper left corner, these are areas that have a high level of impact on quality of life, and they're also doing a little bit more poorly compared to the other factors. So people aren't rating these factors as highly. So looking at various factors, there are 4 factors here that actually drive quality of life in Brampton. So in the upper right corner is satisfaction with services delivered by the city, and this would be considered a success. It has the highest impact on overall quality of life, and it also received a high level of satisfaction from the survey, with 72% being satisfied with services delivered by the city. Right below is receiving good value for tax dollars. This we would also consider as a success. It's the second most impactful factor towards quality of life in Brampton, and it's actually the factor with the greatest level of satisfaction, with 78% being satisfied, or in this case, saying that they're receiving good values for their tax dollars. Now moving over to the more left side of the graph, we have satisfaction with road safety. This would, it's kind of borderline, but we can consider this as a target. So this is the third most impactful factor, and it's actually also the lowest performing factor compared to the other 3. And so focus should be put on this to increase satisfaction with road safety in order to possibly help increase quality of life in Brampton. And then right below that is satisfaction with bylaw enforcement, has the lowest impact compared to the other 3, and with 64% being satisfied with bylaw enforcement. So just to reiterate for this graph, satisfaction with services delivered by the city would be considered a success, and the main target here would be satisfaction with road safety. Yep.
And we do want to get some questions in, and we have 2 more presentations before 9 o'clock.
Perfect timing. It's
okay.
we actually have questions next.
Okay, great.
Here you go.
Okay,
Oh, here you go.
great.
So we are ready for questions.
So I'm going to ask council members to be brief, because we do have the BIA and the library here that we want to get to their presentations. They've taken time out of their schedule to present. It's always good to get an assessment of research done in the public sphere, so thank you for that. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My mic's not on, I don't think. No, I'm good. Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I like to see numbers. I think they can be very impactful. So I've just got a few questions here. Was the question asked, are you a homeowner?
We would have to double check that, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure. We will be able to provide that answer shortly.
Okay. The other thing is, do we know how long that they've lived in the city?
One moment.
It's okay. I'll go through these quickly.
Yeah, please.
One thing that's important for me, did we find out whether they voted in the last election or not?
Mr. Chair, I would say to the member that it's not a question that we asked.
Okay, because we only had a 34% turnout typically in our elections. And to me, it makes a big difference. A person who takes the time and goes out and votes, and when they do these surveys, it's a little more impactful because they had a choice in the people that are making the decisions. Is the 2015 survey, was it done at the same time, August 30th through September, as this survey was? Do you know?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I can't answer that one.
Okay, and the only reason I'm asking that is because I'm wondering how skewed the answers would have been if we did it in February after a snowfall. Would people still be satisfied with the level of road maintenance and things like that? So it has an impact. The only other thing that I would have liked to have seen here, and maybe we can still get this, is a breakdown of the demographic by age compared to what their responses were. Because, for example, if we have the senior demographic and we can cross-split that with satisfaction with recreational services, we get a much better idea if we're doing a good job for our seniors in the recreation programs. Whereas, you know, a younger demographic might say, yeah, this is great, you guys, your hockey rinks are always open, this is always open, but seniors may not feel that way. And so it's not really giving us an accurate picture of how a certain demographic feels about how we're doing certain things. So that would have been a little more valuable for me here. But other than that, we've got the numbers. I don't know whether if you guys want to send the data so that we can cross-reference those numbers and find out, you know, this particular age group says they think taxes should be left alone, whereas this 34 to 60-year-olds feel taxes should be increased so that service levels increase. Those kind of things, to me, would be very interesting to know.
Mr. Chair, I would say to the member that that data is available. We do have access to it, and in a longer presentation, that's something that we certainly would have provided, but we didn't want to get too much into the details for the purposes of this presentation. We wanted to provide high-level results to make sure that council had those high-level results for their budget deliberations.
And what I see here is virtually we've maintained everything from 2015 to today. And, you know, do we want to look at that and say that was great, we're still meeting the expectations that we met 4 years ago, or do we want to say all this time we've spent trying to improve service levels haven't had an impact? So we're gonna have to look at that and try and break that down. But thank you very much.
Councillor
Systems. Hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Mayor, I'm going to strike when the iron's hot. And we have clearly heard today that there is a greater need for resources towards crime and community safety. Unlike previous councils, we've always known this, we've always identified this, yet we've never really supported this. And I think here today with this budget, with the future budgets that we're looking at, this council needs to step up and support and empower the people that we have in community safety in the organization. It's not just a regional and police responsibility, it's a City of Brampton responsibility. And it's time for us to work through this budget and put kind of the money where the mouth is and support the residents that we've heard through this poll, through every single knock door that you've ever heard. We need to support this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and thank you for your presentation. There's no other questions? We do have, and I'm told by the clerk, not only do we have the two other presentations from the Library Board and the BIA, we have a number of public delegations that want to speak to the transit fares, user and licensing fees. So we have 5 members of the public that asked to speak to that. And I'm going to ask the Deputy Clerk, what's the timing we have allocated for each deputation? Is it 2 minutes or 5 minutes?
5.
Okay, up to 5 minutes for each presentation, and then we're going to get to the BIA, so it's going to be a little bit longer. The first up we have is Kevin Montgomery, Brampton resident, Brampton as a police community partner and a passionate advocate for active transportation in the city.
Yeah, do I have a, yes I do, okay, great. Rather timely, thank you, Councillor Fleshley, and that would be through the chair, of course. So, the topic of my presentation is how can Brampton act as a police community partner? And this presentation is heavily influenced by a presentation recently given by our new Chief of Police. So, I offer some ideas on how we might be able to relieve some upward pressures on Peel Police resources. So to contextualize this presentation a little bit, I offer a brief history of policing in the U.S. These quotes are taken from a book called Policing the Open Road by Sarah Seo, and the quotes go before the 20th century, most Americans rarely came into contact with police officers, but with more and more drivers behind the wheel from the mass production of cars, police departments rapidly expanded their forces. With more pavement, in turn leading to more cars, which leads to more drivers, which leads to more police, and therefore higher police budgets. So fast forward about 100 years in Peel, Canada. Now what follows, I should clarify, is not a criticism at all of the police or how money is being spent. It's just to offer some insight on sort of the scope of things right now. So as it stands, about 1/3 of our property taxes go to the region of Peel. Within that Peel bucket, about 1/4 of it goes to police services. I don't think anybody here would question the value of what we're paying for here. And as we heard from the forum research, community safety, public safety and crime is obviously a huge concern to residents in this city. But I want to talk about the metallic elephant in the room. One of the things that often gets presented is Highway Traffic Act charges. And you can see as of this presentation in November, we were looking at an average of 181 charges a day. Now, this is from some annual reports that Peel Police have offered, and you can see that over time it looks like the ratio of charges to available police officer seems to kind of be going down, and that seems like a good thing. So what's the problem? The problem is that criminal driving offenses are going up, and you can see the ratio of criminal driving offenses relative to the number of police officers is going up as an overall ratio, and among that group, fail to remain is going up as well. So looking into the future, what we're projecting with population changes and registered vehicles coming onto the road, this doesn't look like a problem that's going away anytime soon. So the question is traffic enforcement putting pressure on the Peel Police budget? I would suggest probably. So what can Brampton do about it? Well, I suggest that we can relieve upward pressure on motor vehicle enforcement and thereby offering room to reallocate police resources as necessary to help their service delivery by investing in other modes of transport, namely public transit and active transportation, to reduce the number of cars on the road and thereby reduce the pressure on vehicle enforcement. So, let's be good community partners by investing in these services and relieving pressure on motor vehicle enforcement in Peel. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. You're not on the board, Councillor Palashi, but we'll get some technical. Charlotte, Councillor Palashi's button is not working, but why don't you speak and we will.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is technical difficulties. My mic's not working? Oh, yours isn't. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you coming and identifying today what, we have been hearing for quite a long time. And I think I'd like to say it kind of goes without saying, or maybe some people know and some people care to overlook, but the fact is that, vehicle citations and tickets are down because I don't think we have the resources to be able to police it as much as we used to. And although some of your numbers can go one way, and then looking at it from a different point of view, some of your numbers can go the other way. The bottom line is we have less police officers out there enforcing the Traffic Act due to the fact that all of the other crimes that are pulling them towards. And does something need to be done? Absolutely, something needs to be done. And we've heard from our chief, we've heard from our mayor saying that these things do need to be changed. And you're absolutely right. More emphasis and more support needs to be put on getting people out of cars or getting more people into a car with ride sharing or trains, buses, anything else that we can do. So I know Councillor Santos is on, and I'll sit back and listen to her go on about what I think she's going to go on about. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so to the clerk, it doesn't look like we have any of this speakers list on the screen, so if we can work on getting that fixed. I've seen an indication from Councillor Santos that she'd like to speak, and so we will give the floor to her.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. My button's still- There we go. Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Kevin, for coming in. The satisfaction survey that was just presented showed two big problems that residents have highlighted: traffic and congestion, as well as safety concerns. Now, question to staff, and I think we all know the answer to this one. Over the years, let's say over the past decade, have we increased or decreased the number of roads that we've built for cars in particular? It's increased, right? We know that it's increased. Has traffic and congestion increased or decreased even though we've created more of those roads? It's increased, and residents are still incredibly dissatisfied. It's affecting their quality of life. What was interesting to see in that satisfaction survey was that they admitted that transit has increased their quality of life. And yet, we still continue to obsess, hopefully it's going to change soon, obsess over road widenings for more cars. And it costs a lot of money for those roads when we could be investing that money into transit or active transportation. So I will continue to advocate very loudly about road widenings, and I'm very proud that we put a pause on Williams Parkway. And I really want folks to think about what it's going to take to really address traffic and congestion in the city and increase quality of life. So, and with more cars, there is more accidents, there's higher insurance, etc. So thank you for your presentation and allowing me to bloviate once more about active transportation, transit, and congestion.
Thank you, Councillor Santos. Thank you for the presentation, and know that everyone on council is big supporters of active transportation. We got a number of emails based on the KPMG recommendation about clearing paths, and everyone agreed. Not for a second would we support that. We want to make it easier, not harder, to run, to walk, to ride in the city. So thank you for your great work.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Next up on the delegations is Vinkal Desai, Brampton resident, provision of ping pong tables at Cassie Campbell Community Center.
Good evening, Council and Mayor Patrick Brown. This is my first delegation. this is a little bit light, but I contacted Casey Campbell Community Center and I was told by the program manager to have a delegation in the budget meeting, so I'm just standing here. So first of all, as a resident of Brampton, I'm very happy to see that really hard-working council team we have. I'm a Brampton resident for 6 years, and I'm closely following council and all the updates for last 3 or 4 years. But the latest team we have is really hardworking, and I can see the results and the transparency, most important, what is happening at city, and I really thankful for that. Now, the agenda for me today, or the main subject, is to provide table tennis or a ping pong table at Casey Campbell Community Center. Currently, I think only Gore Meadows Community Center is having access to table tennis. So I don't think it's very costly to put a table there. But when I talk to community center, they mentioned that I need to talk to city and then go from there. With respect to the demographic, Brampton West, Ward 2 and 6, where I belong to, is the highly dense ward, I would say, across Brampton. And as of now, as a table tennis player, I have to travel almost 25 to 30 minutes to Terry Miller, where there is only one Brampton club running. And that is also a private person is running as a community thing. So I would really like to see that we have at least one table or two tables in Casey Campbell Community Center. This is one thing. And there are some options I have worked upon along with I also discussed this with Miss Jody at the center. Option number one is there are 2 or 3 community rooms available that can be shared maybe twice a week or once a week at a predefined time, like 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. every Tuesdays or every Wednesdays to begin with, and then people can drop in or play. And as we move forward, maybe we can think of other options and go from there. Option 2, which is already acted upon for badminton. So what they are doing is they have a basketball court, which is fairly huge. So there are no issues for space or anything. They just stand up the nets, and family and people come on weekend to play badminton. Same thing can be done for table tennis. So these are the options. Budget-wise, if we are talking about 2 tables, I would say the budget would be like $1,000 max. And if we have a drop-in fee of $2 per entry, it can be recovered within a year. So that's all I have.
Okay. Well, thank you, Vinkal, for
Thank
coming.
you.
I know it takes a bit of courage to come forward and make your first delegation to council, but this is democracy in action. When you have an idea, you can come right down to City Hall and share it.
No, absolutely. Like I was looking for this for last 5 or 6 years, but then first time I first time realized that we have the most transparent team this time, and this would be the smallest thing to be to become more active as a.
And do you believe there's a lot of residents that would participate?
Absolutely.
Okay. I know Councillor Paleshi has a question. He may be a ping pong fan himself. We'll see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I am a ping pong fan, actually, because I have one in my basement, and my kids are always saying, "Daddy, let's go play ping pong." It's not a very fun game, but it's okay, because they're not very good. That's why.
I know a lot of my friends, they are playing in their basements.
Yep.
But it's more about like talking to the people and being more healthy.
Absolutely.
And like once people will come to play ping pong out of their home, they will come to the community center, they will see other services, and they will increase the city's income.
100%. And, you know, if you don't think table tennis and ping pong is, if you don't think it's a sport, well, try playing ping pong. It's difficult, I tell you. But it's a lot of fun. So I've had an opportunity to speak with FinCo, and we have a number of residents in Mount Pleasant surrounding the Cassie Campbell community that are really looking forward to having something at Cassie Campbell. So I'm going to be requesting that we take the delegation, we send it back to staff. We request that staff find the money within the budget. And additionally, the programming of the table, and then I'd like to also understand, hopefully tomorrow, if it's not too hard, Al, is the cost recovery on 1 year, 1.5 years, and 2 years, and see when we can, and the possibility of finding out kind of what our anticipated lifespan of the ping pong table is as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And thank you for your delegation.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
It's good idea. Next up, we have Sylvia Roberts, a Brampton resident, purpose of Brampton Transit. Sylvia, thank you for your regular participation in council.
Okay, so we have talked a lot about value for money. I've heard that many times from council. The issue for transit is we've never actually defined what is value, what are we trying to achieve. So we're looking at money, but if you have no idea of value, how do you determine what your value for money is? It achieves a lot of different goals, and you need to prioritize what they are. Some of them are climate change, cost of living, housing affordability, municipal service delivery, congestion management. I'm sure you've heard lots from your residents about just how bad congestion is, supporting local businesses, and economic development. Climate change, you've declared a climate emergency. 59% of our emissions in the city of Brampton are from transportation. Study by Nature finds the cost is $417 US per metric ton. At Canadian values, that works out to $550. And the average Canadian emits about 4 tons per year. So that's $2,200 per year in carbon emissions. Note, the city contributes $1,100 a year per rider. So right there, if it's less than 2, you're coming ahead just from carbon emissions. Cost of living, CAA, which presumably you'd agree understands cars, estimates a compact car at $9,500 a year. This doesn't assume that they're paying Brampton car insurance rates, which you've also heard substantially about. We have lots of 2- and 3-car households in Brampton, so you might be spending 40% of your income on housing, and then you're spending another 25% on cars. The cost per year per rider for Brampton Transit was $2,100 operating and $600 capital. Note, this counts every penny going into whether it's fares, provincial contribution, city contribution, ad revenue from the placards inside the bus. It's everything, $3,400 a year. If we say it's $10,000 for Brampton, if you have 2 people ride transit and save $10,000 on a car, $1,600 versus $10,000. That's $3,200 extra for 1 car in residents' pockets. That's a lot of money. And remember, this is post-tax. You've paid money on that. So it's probably worth more like $4,000 or $4,500 to residents. Housing affordability. Our parking requirements don't add very much to the value of properties, but if you're looking at a condo, the requirements currently can be 50, 75 grand, or even $100,000 added to a condo. The condo's gonna be $400,000, $100,000. I would say that that's a substantial chunk. That's several $100s a month more in rent or your mortgage. This is what Halifax did. They actually studied suburban versus urban. It's a little bit old. So $3,400 for suburban and $1,400 for urban. When you update it, it's $4,900 for suburban and $1,800 for urban, which is a substantial difference. And notice this considers all sorts of delivery. They did a further study and found that if they changed how they did their land use planning to be more urban, no, the city of Halifax is less than 500,000 people. They found that they could save up to $3 billion in 20 years. They have 500,000 people. That is a lot of money. Congestion management. LA had a 25-day strike. What they found was they studied it, and the cost of the congestion from that strike just looking at congestion, including literally everything else, by itself justified their transit system and putting more money into it. As we continue to add population, another 300,000 people, you're going to start feeling that. Queen Street, average vehicle count is about 30,000 a day. The Queen Zoom moves 20,000 a day. Depending on where you are on the time of day, the Zoom bus moves more than 50% of the traffic. Metric transportation planning can actually already has data on what congestion costs, and they can run the numbers for you if you ask them to. We need to have actual numbers that we can test and show to residents. Economic development and culture, attracting large businesses. They like transit systems. You had GTA, which represents Pearson Airport, in here earlier, and they're like, hi, we need more transit to support your workers here, but then also getting 2 jobs. Restaurants and entertainment, young people do not have the budget. They can either have a car or they can have money to go do stuff. Without transit in the evening and weekends, there isn't money for both. So I would like council, you don't have to do it tonight, but at some point come up with what do you actually want to get from transit and decide it. And for things like carbon emissions, come up with a number. If you're really concerned about climate, use a higher number. My delegation.
I see no questions, but thank you, Sylvia, for your ongoing advocacy. And next up on the list is Todd Letts, Chief Executive Officer of the Brampton Board of Trade.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. I serve as the Chief Executive Officer of the Brampton Board of Trade, and joining me here today is Glenn Williams, a past chair of the Brampton Board of Trade and dedicated volunteer on our committee that focuses on economic development, policy, and government relations. I think many of you know the Brampton Board of Trade is a nonprofit association of business leaders. Our focus is helping enterprises to succeed and helping our community to prosper. With over 2,300 voting members, they employ over 45,000 people in Brampton. And putting that into perspective, that means that more than a third of all jobs in our city is provided by Brampton Board of Trade members. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could ask us to go to slide 2, or do I have that capability? Yes, I do. That's great. Ladies and gentlemen, the business community has, to assist council in their deliberations, has a number of questions, and our presentation today is focused on the comments from the business community and key questions they have about this year's budget. The questions that they have are an opportunity for council to consider the impact that the budget decisions you make today have on private sector job creation. The decisions you make on property tax, on user fees, on service levels, also have an impact on how businesses make investment decisions. Let me start by saying that the Brampton business community is very optimistic about the future. The Board of Trade members are finding ways to grow, to invest, to create jobs, and there's a collective sense that together we're poised for greatness. When it comes down to implementing the vision, when it comes down to the finances, property tax, and cost of doing business in Brampton, businesses are very practical. They want to know 3 things. Why are my taxes so high? Why is council proposing more taxation in 2020? And what is the longer-term plan? How will the fiscal and economic environment change next year and the year after that? And how does that impact our members' abilities to create jobs? Ladies and gentlemen, when we take a look comparatively at the tax rate for residences, we know that our taxation from the residential community is relatively high. About 78% of our taxes are raised by residential taxpayers, and quite simply, if we want to mitigate any tax increases, more businesses need to be attracted to town. And when that happens, the impact will not only be more jobs, but mitigating the property tax and user fee burden on all residents. Let me take time right now to thank council for its focus on job creation during its first year. If we take a look at the business comparisons as well, we're on the higher end of taxes borne by commercial and industrial taxpayers when compared to other communities in the GTA. We have recommendations that we think can help council maintain and improve the livability of Brampton to meet its objectives, but to also encourage and leverage private sector investment for jobs and for jobs in our community and more investment as well. We noticed that council has a proposed 1.2% property tax increase, but that there is also a stormwater user fee of about $22 million that is proposed to be collected. If you take the proposed property tax increase and the stormwater fee, you're looking at about a 5.8% increase. And that is an increase that a lot of businesses have not budgeted for in this year ahead. What we also hear from the business community is, how do I plan ahead? What do I tell investors in my company, owners of our company, the head office about the cost of doing business in Brampton, not only in 2020, but in 2021 and 2022. And we noticed that in this year's budget, those forecasts of property tax increases aren't in the budget, and it's an omission that might actually help attract more business and help businesses to plan. That planning allows them to plan equipment purchases, their ability to win product mandate decisions when they're in competition with other plants across North America, across the world. It impacts their charitable decisions, and it impacts their hiring and firing decisions. So the question before council is, what's the right mix of revenue, property tax, and user fees to provide a high standard of living and best leverage taxpayer investment with private sector investment to make Brampton the very best it can be? So our recommendations are really threefold. One, stop overtaxing, and the council is on the right road to that. Last year, a 0% tax increase. You're able to do it for more than 1 year by leveraging Brampton's financial strength, particularly your operating surplus and your reserves. Secondly, optimizing service levels and revenue sources. And again, you're on the right track there by looking at efficiencies. And the third strategy is establishing a strategic economic development infrastructure fund, one that attracts more business. And again, by attracting more business, we can mitigate the burden on existing residents and businesses. Let's take a closer look at these recommendations. With respect to taxation, we can go into more detail perhaps in Q&A. We also have submitted to you a letter that details this, but at the highest level, your operating surplus at over $16 million, that can be used this year. You could consider not topping up the general rate stabilization reserve, and instead use some of that surplus to reduce taxes in 2020, 2021, 2022. A second step for you to consider would be to combine the reserves that you have and benchmark it at 10% of operating expenditures. That's a reasonable reserve level to have. By taking the general rate stabilization reserve at $67 million, the debt payment reserve, the interest rate stabilization reserve, to protect, they all have the same purpose, to protect taxpayers from future unanticipated tax pressures. These three reserves can be combined, and an overall reserve of 10% can be put together. The third is, again, leveraging that reserve strength. So stop collecting taxes just to put in the bank in low interest investments. Let taxpayers keep some of that. The second strategy really focuses on the value of time. Council has done such a great job in starting a number of initiatives, your FDI initiative, your development charge policy, investments in entrepreneurship, and this is very consistent with the success of bringing new business to Brampton. What can Brampton City Council do now to position itself as the most business-friendly jurisdiction in the GTA? And through efficiencies, you can with your KPMG studies, etc., it's another way that we can get approvals for developments done faster, bring more businesses, and really position Brampton as the community that is facilitating job creation in the GTA the fastest. Lastly, in long-term planning, I mentioned the property tax increase forecast was missing in this year's budget. Likewise, the capital budgeting, we're really encouraging a 10-year capital budget forecast. As business people, the Board of Trade recognizes the difficulty that Brampton City Council has with this. Your estimates are of the infrastructure gap, for example, are low in reliability, as mentioned in your budget reports. In the 2016 staff report, for example, unfunded capital was $192 million and was forecast to grow to $367 million by the end of 2018. When staff reported in 2018, the gap had only increased by $246 million. So it did increase, but not the $175 million, but by only $54 million. I'm just using one example, is that this is a large variance in your forecast, and that means you're collecting more taxes than you're actually using. It's just sitting in low interest bank accounts. So in the staff presentation yesterday, we learned more about how forecasting is done. It's done by amortization. There are better ways that we can do it by actual inspection, and as such, this is an opportunity for you to mitigate tax increases again this year. Also, in your projections, you're not forecasting any funding from senior levels of government. This is overly pessimistic and creates an impression that more taxes are needed to pay for future costs. In order to bring more confidence to the business community, a 10-year capital forecast and a strategic economic development infrastructure fund should be created. Let's talk a little bit about this strategic economic development fund. The idea is one that is tried and true in other innovative jurisdictions.
I'll just mention we've allocated 5 minutes per presentation. We're at about 9 right now.
Okay.
I love what you're saying, so I'm giving you a little bit of discretion, but if we could try to...
I appreciate that very much. I'll wrap it up.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. And we're happy to explain a little bit more about the strategic economic development fund and how it's consistent with your efforts to bring more business to Brampton. It really helps Brampton in it's currently in a no funding loop. Let's break that destructive loop. With no local level of funding, there's no planning, there's no shovel-ready projects, there's no provincial or federal funding. This is a cycle that I think we can break by looking at a strategic economic development fund. So, Your Worship, Mayors of Council, to close today's deputation, we think that there are other options available to Council to best serve its citizens, best meet its objectives, and best leverage private sector investment by employing these 3 strategies: stop overtaxing, optimize service levels, and establish a long-term economic development fund. As such, we think that a tax increase this year can be brought in at less than 1%. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Todd, for the presentation, the Board of Trade for your annual recommendations. What I love about the Board of Trade is not only do you advocate a position, but you give suggestions. And I was more lenient on the time than I normally am because what you're saying was music to my ears. I said similar comments yesterday at the start of our budget deliberations. I listed all the municipalities in the GTA and where we stand, and we still have work to do to become tax competitive. It is critical for economic development. You mentioned the city surplus, and I said yesterday, it's not our money. It's not our money to spend on other projects or to put into reserves. If we've overcharged the public by $15 million, then it's their money and it should be returned. And so I loved your suggestion there. So thank you for the recommendations. And thank you for referencing the stormwater management fee, because that's, I understand we have obligations to deal with volatile weather, and I think we're doing the right thing in making sure that our infrastructure is up to date and we're prepared for that. But we have to be mindful of the cost that we're putting on, particularly this year, because that's a fee that businesses, that homeowners are going to feel, and it's significant. So very relevant. I appreciate that. Councillor Vicente has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Todd, for coming in and giving us insights from the business community. We've just completed approximately a year's worth of service level review, and whether or not it was a value for money audit, we are currently looking at that. In the private sector, service level reviews and audits are ongoing at all times. How far do you think we should be willing to go to continue to do deep dives into individual departments to find opportunities for savings, to find efficiencies, to organize the business, the work that we do for the residents better?
It's valuable work to continue for two reasons. Not only the cost efficiencies that you might find, but the process efficiencies. And by process efficiencies, what I mean is time-based metrics. If Brampton were to be able to position itself as the community that can facilitate the fastest development approvals, be the community that facilitates job creation better than any other in the GTA. It's those value for money audits, it's those efficiency studies, those process improvements that can bring you to that objective and really brand Brampton in the manner that you want it, that we all want it, as a great place to live and a great place to do business.
So you see it as a way not just of savings, but also delivering better service as well,
Yes.
right? Okay. I want to give you an opportunity to explain perhaps a little bit more thoroughly the Strategic Economic Development Infrastructure Fund and how that might be important for us here as we consider this year's budget.
Great, happy to. The Strategic Economic Development, and Glenn, please feel free to add to this as well, is a concept to designate a amount of money, maybe somewhere between 150 million to 500 million, to be ready for the big projects that we know are part of an integrated plan here in Brampton. Projects like the Riverwalk, projects like the LRT extension, projects like the hospital, etc. This concept of a strategic economic development plan is not a new one to municipalities. Kitchener, in about 13 years ago, established a strategic economic development fund of $150 million. And it wasn't project-based. It was there and ready for when opportunities came from the feds, from the province, from academia, for example, that the city could participate, put some skin in the game, and accelerate and capture that opportunity. What did they capture? A new medical school and a new pharmacy school with the Strategic Economic Development Fund. How would Brampton bring it about? Well, the fund would be financed by three sources: current reserves, so a reallocation of existing reserves, such as the legacy fund and annual contributions to this fund. Two, debt financing. Some of these projects will simply not happen without debt. And three, other levels of government. Again, Brampton will need partners in many of the big initiatives that you had on your ask list to your federal pre-budget submission, for example. So what problem is this solving? Well, from the business community's perspective, right now, all that ever gets budgeted for is very specific projects within a 3-year window. So there's no planning for the big ideas, and as I mentioned in the presentation, we're kind of stuck in a no funding loop. If we don't have set cash designated for the economic development plan, we don't plan. We don't have the shovel-ready projects. No shovel-ready projects, therefore no provincial funding. It's a circle that I think we need to, a destructive one that we need to break.
I see the treasurer listening intently as you explain this. We currently have a legacy fund, approximately $100 million, if I'm not incorrect. So that kind of capital is there. Is there something that we should be doing differently, or in how we think about those funds and what they can be used for?
I think if I can, Todd, the idea is to think bigger, much bigger. So we know there'll be a new hospital, a third hospital even after phase 2 of Peel Memorial. We know there'll be an LRT. How it's built, we don't know. We know there'll be Queen Street BRT at some point. These are big ticket items that probably add up to more than $1 billion. If we start to create this long-term $10 or $1 billion legacy fund, and we say we know we're going here, but we don't get too specific, because we can't say what this is going to cost or where that's going to be built and those details, but the long-range 10-year plus planning says we know we're going to need these large ticket items, and here's Brampton's contribution. Some will come from the existing legacy fund. Some will come from contributions like a new hospital levy, which is very specific but controversial. But it becomes easier to approve if it is generic for large ticket items. So you've got existing assets, contributions, money coming from federal, provincial governments, as well as debt financing to create the $1 billion of assets you might need for these major long-term infrastructure projects. So we're thinking big, we're thinking long-term.
And the fact that you have a legacy fund is a really good start. What if you just repositioned the branding of it so that investors from around the world can see that Brampton is different from other municipalities that are nearby? It's a competitive advantage if we call it a strategic economic development plan. Come to us with your best ideas. So from a marketing component and a thinking big component, and the fact that we've got the basis of a fund already, it's not a big shift in order to make that shift to really set us apart.
Thank you very much, Todd. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Vicente. Thank you, Todd, and Glenn. Always welcome Board of Trade input. Thank you. Next up on the list is we have Mark Seba, Brampton resident, about transit investments.
Members of Council, Mayor Brown, let us talk about everyone's favorite subject, transit. So, what is transit? Transit is the carrying of people, goods, or materials from one place to another. There you go. So, in this context, what are some ways for carrying people? I like to say that we have two groups, privately and publicly. Privately, we have automobiles, we have bicycles, we walk, and we have other various forms. Publicly, we travel on buses and other various rail forms. Okay, don't know why this photo here, so ignore this photo. Do not pay attention to that photo, it means absolutely nothing. I do want to acknowledge the 2019 approved budget. Ridership, both in 2017 and 2018, grew 18 and 14%. That budget acknowledged, or that statement acknowledged that there was overcrowding on 40% of the routes. So my question is, 2040 vision, it's a wonderful vision, but are we truly on track to keep up with it? So likewise, I want to talk about congestion in this city, like every other city. I would like to say that Brampton roadways used to have a major congestion problem, but I think we just call it everyday accepted traveling now. It's something we see and it's something we deal with every day. So my question is, how intolerable does travel need to become before we implement real solutions? Existing solutions to widen roads are interesting because we've disrupted traffic as it is in the hopes of relieving congestion. But when it's done, it never happens. And in fact, it may get further exaggerated. Why is that? Well, there's this concept we refer to as induced demand. What is induced demand? It is a phenomenon that when supply increases, more of a good is increased. So in this case, we all desire for extra space on the road. Suddenly, but we never demanded it. Suddenly you add this lane and it's just taken up immediately. So congestion will remain always. I would like to echo Councillor Santos's thoughts. We all want to get to our destinations as fast as possible, but we never considered how we can all do it for everyone instead of just for me. We forget that this city is a single unit of many parts, over 700,000 parts, over 700,000 people living in the city. So how do you increase the capacity? Well, you improve and diversify transit. Traffic is the flow of people on all transit carriers, not just automobiles. We don't just use automobiles. We use bikes, we use buses, and we walk. We would do anything to get from A to B. A standard bus holds 39 people. The largest 60-foot buses hold 49. double if we're talking about people who have to stand. Okay, once again, the side keeps popping up, so don't pay attention. I do want to highlight the capital projects as it relates to road widenings. So we have the Castlemore Road widening, the Chinguacousy Road widening, the Gorway Drive widening, and the Williams Parkway widening, which perhaps is on hold. And subsequently, we have the bus purchases and bus refurbishments that are happening to maintain and perhaps improve the transit service. And this is the cost related to it. But look at the network it covers. You know, this is a network that spans from Mayfield Road to Steeles and from Mississauga Road to Highway 50, including parts of, extending it to parts of Toronto, parts of Mississauga, and Vaughan. Again, this photo keeps showing up. Don't know why. You know, widening roads will further the issue with congestion, and the investment into that will not last long. Encourage the diversification of transit. Be the living examples of it. People will switch over. You know, money that has been set aside for roadworks, while it is obligated, it is not mandatory. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I see no questions, but we'll keep a copy of your presentation, and thanks for taking the time to present at City Hall.
Thank you, Ben.
We need to have a motion to receive the 5 delegations. Can I have a motion from Councillor Willen, seconded by Councillor Bowman? All those in favor, motion carries. Okay, next up on our list is the Downtown BIA, Susie Godfrey, Executive Director, and Christina Romesco, Board Chair, who are doing critical work for us in the
Good
downtown.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Brown and Brampton City Council. On behalf of the Downtown Brampton BIA, I would like to thank you all for inviting the Downtown Brampton BIA here tonight to make our budget presentation. And as noted, I'm the Executive Director of the Downtown Brampton BIA, and I'm here with our Chair, Christina Romasco. And just for starters, I just wanted to share with you the vision of the Downtown Brampton BIA. Downtown Brampton is a respected and welcoming destination dedicated to bringing people together for quality shopping, services, and entertainment. The mission of the Downtown Brampton BIA is to promote and enhance downtown Brampton through marketing, events, and beautification to build confidence and engagement with its business community. And I just wanted to take a quick side note onto the right-hand side of that slide presentation is the latest edition of Discover Downtown Brampton, which is a marketing partnership with the city. And they are going to be delivered to our office tomorrow, and they'll be at Pearson International Airport, Terminal 3, just a side note. So this is very exciting for the business community. Our next part of this presentation is to share with you our key goals. And those include to promote the value and raise awareness of downtown Brampton, to create a cool and trendy vibe for the business district, and to continue to create synergies with the city of Brampton for the betterment of our downtown core. So our key areas of service include advocacy, beautification, marketing, events, safety, and sponsorship and partnership, revenue, and community relationships. We are governed by 12 board of directors, 2 whom are appointed by council, Councillor Medeiros and Councillor Santos, and we have 3 staff, myself, our marketing and events specialist, and our events and administration and membership services lead. There's a quick slide of the 12 board of directors who are very passionate business owners and landlords, and I'm very grateful to be working with such an amazing team who are very passionate for our downtown core. So for tonight's presentation, this slide just has a quick overview of the budget process at our office. And we start budgeting in the summertime. We have open workshops with our business community in the summer months, and then we take that back to our working teams and the board of directors in the fall. And we just recently had a final budget meeting on February the 4th to tweak the budget, and here we are tonight. Some of the highlights of the Downtown Brampton BIA include, from 2019, continuing to implement our Downtown Brampton strategic plan, continuing with our partnerships with the City of Brampton. And I did want to make a special note that we work with a number of different departments. I did want to personally thank the leadership at council and the leadership at the management level, and there's some city staff in the audience because we work with so many different departments, and we're very grateful for those positive relationships. Sometimes we don't always agree, but we always find a way to come together and come together with common ground. So in 2019, we continued to advocate on behalf of the business community with regards to the streetscaping upgrades that are in the works. We also continued with ongoing communications. Excuse me. We also participated in a city initiative called Bike to Work Day, and we've heard a lot about active transportation, and so that is a really fun event, and it's a great opportunity to encourage local businesses and staff to consider alternative options as to just driving into the downtown core. We organize an event called Meet the Beat, and we do an annual barbecue in the downtown core, and it's a great opportunity for everyone to come together with the Peel Regional Police and all of the downtown Brampton service providers, such as Regeneration and the John Howard Society. On the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see a list of a number of events, so I'm not going to read that whole list over tonight, but I did just want to make note that we are constantly creating new marketing projects and programs and host a number of events that are truly family-oriented, a lot of fun, and they make our downtown special. So we're going to be celebrating or kicking off the Taste tomorrow morning. The Taste will be officially starting in 2020 next Thursday, and the BIA also sponsors a number of events that are held in the downtown core. So that's a list of some of the events that we partnered with regards to 2019. Moving forward to 2020, we're in the first quarter. We're continuing to move forward with our strategic plan and align the business action plan to new initiatives that come up at the office. We just recently presented a beautiful and safe street strategy to the board of directors through our safety and beautification team. We have an event strategy, a marketing and communication strategy, and we're constantly engaging with the local business community and our local residents, who are our main stakeholders for the downtown core. And of course, we have a sponsorship plan. Okay, there's that. Okay, whoops. I'll go back. So with regards to advocacy for 2020, when new businesses come into the downtown core, we have a special welcoming meeting. We have a membership booklet, which I have copies for all of you for the new 2020 issue. And we do regular communications out to the business community. We're always celebrating grand openings. We have a business mixer quarterly, and we have one next Tuesday at Indian Curry Restaurant. And we're gearing up for our February coffee talk, which will be tomorrow morning, and we host those on a monthly basis. And it's an opportunity to come together with myself and our board and the business community to talk about issues of the downtown. We also host our annual general meeting, which will be held at the end of May. I believe it's May the 26th. There's a confirmed date now. And we encourage all council and the mayor and staff and the public at large to attend those meetings, because it's a great opportunity to hear about everything that we're working on, like tonight. Okay, with regards to beautification, we've heard a lot about how we can all do a better job as a community in the downtown to beautify the area, continue to make the downtown more welcoming. And the BI has a number of rebate programs for the businesses. So we have a storefront decorative rebate program that all businesses can apply. And I believe the rebate is up to $75, but it's a little incentive to help, pretty up the exterior of your business. We also have a safe and clean rebate program that was just launched last fall. And that is with regards to enhancing the exterior of your property from a safety perspective, and or if you wanted to do some special cleaning like your windows or some improvements. We also host two clean up days. We have a spring and fall cleanup scheduled for 2020. We do seasonal window decorating contests to encourage our businesses to keep that sparkle alive in the storefronts, because that's the best part about every downtown across Canada is the lovely storefronts and the walkability of the downtown. We're also working with the city with regards to a permanent A-frame program. And in 2019, we were working with city staff on lighting enhancements. So we have a program called Light Up Our Laneways in partnership with the city. And we'll be continuing to look at other public spaces and laneways and how we can continue to build on that project. Okay, with regards to the marketing, we have a very exciting marketing campaign for 2020 called My Downtown Brampton, and Christina was here earlier in January to launch that program and campaign. And My Downtown Brampton is an opportunity for the local community to tell us more about what they love about our downtown, to encourage everybody to share those special stories, special moments that they're sharing in our downtown, whether that's going to the Rose Theater or going to see an exhibit at the PAMA, or enjoying a lovely meal at one of our restaurants, or going for a dental checkup. There's lots of special things in our downtown, lots of great things. So we've launched My Downtown Brampton. You will be seeing lots of new slogans and new street banners will be coming down the pipeline. And the new magazine, Discover Downtown Brampton, has a whole page devoted to My Downtown Brampton. As I mentioned earlier, we've got the destination marketing with this magazine, Discover Downtown Brampton, and we're continuing to collaborate with the city of Brampton to keep the downtown at the front and center of the city of Brampton. It is the heart and soul, and there's a lot of things happening, very exciting things, and we're very eager to continue this relationship with the city and a number of stakeholders. Some of the community partners include Algoma University, Sheridan College, Judith Nyman Secondary School, Turner Fenton School, Fire Department, Peel Regional Police, and we're very thankful for those relationships because they make our job easy sometimes not, but those relationships are there and they help us propel into different areas, and we take these back to our working teams, and we're always measuring our successes and sometimes failures with regards to various projects that we're working on by data and identifying those KPIs and continuing to engage with our businesses on how we can make the downtown more successful. So key deliverables for 2020 include the My Downtown Brampton campaign, Discover Downtown Brampton magazine, our social media marketing, and our sponsorship programs, sorry. Okay, I'm gonna go back to safety, and for 2020, we have already had some discussions with the city with regards to continuing looking at working on a laneway strategy. We're always looking at the downtown walkability score, because that's, we have a pretty amazing downtown, but we're always looking at ways how we can increase that score. I've already mentioned the lighting and the laneways. I did want to take note with regards to safety. We've got a number of service providers such as Regeneration, and we'll be walking this Saturday as a Downtown Brampton team in the coldest night of the year. And we'll be also hosting a number of safety workshops for the business community, and we've got one next Thursday on crime prevention through environmental design and robbery prevention. And in March, we'll be doing a workshop on human trafficking. Okay, so my slide here is an overview of the 2020 budget, and I'm just going to make some notes here. You'll see the total expenditures projected for 2020 is $537,053, and of that, of those dollars, the BIA levy, which is a primary tax levy, represents $392,943, and I'd like to make note that we've maintained that tax levy for the last 4 years, since 2017, and it's important to note that we've been able to maintain that levy, which is a tax back to the landlords in the downtown Brampton BIA, through a number of partnerships and the city's support. So I did want to again acknowledge the city's support through the marketing partnership grant, rent relief, as well as the in-kind event support. And this year we also encountered some tax loss, so there was some tax relief there. And I did want to also mention that for 2020, I have city staff and Treasurer Zishan Majid here to talk about moving forward with a mechanism for dealing with future tax levy impact with regards to city purchased buildings in the downtown core. So I have Z here.
Susie, are you finished your part? Because we've got your presentation, which we'll receive,
Pretty
and then
much,
we've got
yeah,
then
Z's
we've got a
gonna make a
report from
quick,
Z.
is that okay? Or-
Well, yeah, if you want to finish yours, and then
Sure,
we've got the
okay,
report from Z
great.
that we'll bring forward.
Okay, so Z will be just making a short, brief presentation, and then my other part was just, we rely on a lot of revenue, additional revenue generation to keep that levy where it is. And so we do sponsorship opportunities through special events and marketing programs, and of course grants and overall marketing revenue through marketing projects. Okay.
I see no other questions, but we do have a staff presentation on financial assistance to the downtown Brampton BIA.
Okay.
Are we doing that now? Okay, great.
Great, thank you.
Do we need to receive the report first? Okay, I have a motion to receive. Councillor Bowman and Councillor Vicente, all those in favor to receive the delegation, motion passes.
Thank you, Council. So the quick presentation right now is with reference to a referred matter, 15-2020, as it relates to the financial assistance to be provided to the BIA. So just in terms of quick background, last month, Council approved a financial relief of around $62,000 to the BIA. And that represented the BIA tax levy impact for city purchased properties within the downtown BIA boundary. And just to highlight, the $61,000 or $62,000 represented the BIA levy impact for 3 specific properties that the city had purchased, and it related to the impact for 2018 and 2019. And one of the matters that was referred back to staff was how do we deal with that on a go-forward basis, and what's the financial mechanism we can put in play to kind of take that into account. So just as an update as it relates to the 2020 budget, staff have been able to go back and review what the levy impact is going to be for 2020 purposes as it relates to those 3 specific properties. And the levy impact for just 2020 is estimated to be another $39,000. And in the budget that Susie previously presented, that $39,000 has been included in the budget as a further financial assistance from the city. So that's as it relates to 2020. And then the second piece to it is what's the mechanism on a go-forward or recurring basis 2020 and thereafter. So staff have kind of come up with 2 essential options to council for their consideration. In both options, the city essentially absorbs the levy impact for city purchased properties within the BIA. But in option 1, which we're kind of calling more of a permanent option, the city actually tracks the assessment value of properties within the BIA boundary. And once this assessment value kind of returns back to 2018 levels, or the levels before the city made some of those purchases, the city stops further financial assistance. So there's a mechanism to kind of track that, and once assessment level value goes back to what it used to be in 2018, the city stops this financial assistance for the levy impact for city purchased properties. Option 2 for consideration is something that we're calling temporary, where the city actually tracks the actual relief that the city is providing the BIA for the loss in BIA levy. But then in future years, as a result of downtown development and supplemental tax assessments coming through, the city actually takes back some of that financial assistance before that revenue goes back to the BIA levy. So it's kind of like we're providing the upfront amount to the BIA today, but in future years, as a result of supplemental assessments, we'll kind of remove that levy that we kind of provided to the BIA in earlier years, kind of claw that back, and then let the BIA kind of keep that benefit. So those are kind of the two options that we want to put forward for council's consideration. One's more permanent, and one is you kind of take that back from the BIA in future years. Regardless of the option chosen, staff will continue to kind of track that amount and report back to council for approval every year as part of annual budget deliberations.
Seeing no questions, do we have does this require just a motion? Is there a councillor that wants to recommend an option? Option 1 or 2? Okay, so we're going to receive it and we're going to select it at the next council meeting? Okay. A motion to receive the delegation moved by Councillor Vicente, seconded by Councillor Santos. All those in favor? Motion carries. And to the BIA, we'll have this added to our agenda for the next council meeting so we can have a broader conversation on this. Okay, next up is we have the Brampton Public Library, Suzanne and J. Paul.
Right side, left side?
I'm good on this.
And thank you, J. Paul. J. Paul officially signed in my son at 7 months old as a Brampton Library member. So, well done.
And you'll be pleased to know, as just a reminder, that all children's materials are now fine-free in the Brampton Public Library. So, Theodore can enjoy those books as long as he needs to. So, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and staff. We're pleased to be here today to talk about our 2020 budget for your consideration. I'm J. Paul Massey Singh. I'm the board chair for Brampton Library. I'm joined today by Susan Bartoletta, who's a longtime leader in the organization and our interim CEO. And we're also joined by several members of our senior management team and leadership from our librarian workforce here today as well. So just a lot of solidarity behind the library's request. I do want to be mindful of time. I know this meeting is going long, but those who know me know I'm going to ask right off the bat if we could ask for an extra few minutes of council's indulgence. I would greatly appreciate that. We have some detail we want to get into.
Councilor Paletti? Yep, okay.
Thank you very much. As you know, Brampton Library serves, thank you very much. As you know, Brampton Library serves our community now through 8 branches in Brampton, serving the needs of over 200,000 users, with over 2 million visits and over 4 million items board on an annual basis. Brampton Library provides our community with essential services, including early literacy opportunities, reskilling programs, study spaces for students both in our secondary schools and our post-secondary, and safe and open public spaces that all citizens, regardless of socioeconomic status, can access. Given the huge breadth of service and the large number of Bramptonians we serve, we believe we're making a very modest operating budget request of $18.2 million for 2020. This is accompanied with capital budget requests of $1.7 million annually over the next 3 years. Our staff has worked very closely with City of Brampton Finance Department to prepare our budget request, and we have kept in mind, as much as possible, the budgetary goals in managing of council and managing the community demands and expectations that we hear on a daily basis. Every year, as you know, we continuously strive to provide maximum value for the funding we receive. And through many audit cycles, including the most recent one done by Ernst & Young, once again reiterates what I know Council already knows, that we've been benchmarked and continue to be the most efficient large urban public library in Canada. Our budget driver this year, as we look at where we want to spend the funds that we're getting, it's all about keeping pace. Like every other department and service in the city, Brampton Library is facing pressures as our population grows by over 14,000 residents every year, with the majority of newcomers making Brampton Library their first stop. Libraries across all cultures are safe spaces and for resources, whether we're talking about information on job opportunities, schools, or even sometimes we're just to get your health card. Brampton Library receives regular feedback from the community, with the top 3 requests being more programming, more study opportunities with longer hours, and of course, more books. Specifically, demand in attendance in our programs and classes continues to grow, with an increase in attendance of 38% since 2016. To satisfy the resident demand for longer hours, the library has been able to support academic success in our community by providing safe spaces for students to study after hours, and we're looking to continue to expand that program wherever possible. Our after-hours study program has grown consistently over the last year by providing over 200 sessions above and beyond for students to come and utilize Brampton Library resources for part of their academic success. Specific goals for 2020, with respect to our objectives for the coming year, are specifically to grow physical and digital borrowing, to review opportunities to continue to support and potentially grow our extended study hours, to increase program attendance across our system, and to grow library active membership. The library's budget goals are consistent with the city's annual average population growth, and we see growth opportunities for the library in materials borrowed, program attendance, and in membership. The library board will review opportunities to continue to support extended study hours specifically, and will work with our stakeholders, including the City of Brampton, Sheridan College, and Algoma University, to ensure that we're meeting the needs of students now and in the future. All that said, our budget request this year is enough to keep pace. But status quo, as we know in the City of Brampton, is simply not enough in a community that grows at the pace that ours does. With that said, Susan's now going to go into some context and some detail on our budget request so you can understand what it is that we're looking to do in the coming year.
Thank you. So before we look at our priorities for 2020, we'd like to take this opportunity to highlight some of our successes in 2019. One of our most significant achievements was the construction completion of our new Southwest Branch Library, which formally opened to the public on January the 8th. We successfully launched our on-the-go library van with programming that supports a various number of community events that supplies programming for STEM learning and digital literacy. We also successfully reconfigured our space at the Mount Pleasant Village branch to support the rapid increase of visits at that location in particular, and to respond to the growing demands from that community for more children's programming and more quiet space, and no surprise there. As we move into 2020, some of the key initiatives that we would like to highlight include the launch of a new CRM, or Customer Relationship Management solution, which will support our goal of growing our active membership, and also gives us the opportunity to engage and communicate more with our current and potential customers. The library will be undertaking a space optimization review of our South Fletcher's branch to determine opportunities for a more efficient and effective use of the space there that will provide a safer and more welcoming environment that is also more engaging and more conducive to the needs of that particular community. Also, in line with the E&Y recommendations, and also in the recent KPMG report and library board priorities, the board will be engaging with stakeholders on a new facility master plan, which will direct future library growth as our current facilities master plan has come to the end of its life cycle.
When identifying the priorities for 2020, the board and senior leadership worked to ensure that our operating priorities aligned with the city's strategic priorities. Specifically, we look to support residents through providing services and resources that provide Brampton youth with school readiness and academic success as the #1 focus for the organization, providing programs that facilitate career readiness and career success. An example being providing over 6,000 programs attended by over 150,000 residents last year, including STEM and makerspace opportunities, which, as we've shared in the past, are very much the envy of library systems across the country. These, for our residents, primarily focusing these in underserviced areas, and we're looking to expand e-resource content, for which the demand has grown over 30% in the past year. Further, we're happy to show the library continues to be one of the most efficient libraries in Canada. As we've said, we are spending far below what it is that a library of our size and scope generally would receive, and we trust that we provide very real value to the community of Brampton. That council should be very happy to see those dollars being put to good use. Furthermore, the library continues to be a leader not just in our spending and in our innovation, but in providing services, programs, and collections that support diversity and accessibility in our community. The library regularly engages with various stakeholders to provide diverse services and programs. I can say also specifically we're one of the few libraries who actually invest specifically in individuals who take leadership in these particular areas of library service. We look to more closely align these programs and resources with cultural needs in our neighborhoods going forward. Some of the examples of that diversity and inclusion activity that we take on right now is that we have library settlement partnership programs allowing newcomers into the community to have a first point of contact that helps facilitate a smooth transition into Canadian life. We have settlement workers that help facilitate conversation circles, newcomers, seniors groups, and women's circles. And we have computer and other tech programs available in Hindi, Punjabi, and Urdu to ensure that those who are coming into our community are able to access resources and develop their skills in the most efficient and effective manner possible. We want to make sure every Bramptonian has a home at the Brampton Library. With that, a little more detail on our specific budget request.
There we go. As a follow-up to the budget snapshot on the first slide, our 2020 operating budget request is for $18.2 million, which represents an increase or variance of $551,000 from the previous year. And that's essentially to maintain current operational services. And the majority of this request is to support negotiated wage increases. Our budget also includes funds to support growth in our e-resources or media and other administrative expenses, in particular supporting a full-time security guard at our Four Corners branch. We've also experienced an increase in revenue, specifically in rental income, and this is due to our partnership with Early On in our Southwest branch and some donations. In terms of our capital budget, our capital budget is consistent with our prior year's requests, with the majority of the capital going to support our collection development, and this is primarily our physical collection, and which you know is also essential to our operations. In addition, our 2020 request includes a refresh, and you'll see an increase in the automation software and hardware upgrades, a one-time request for a refresh of our self-checkout equipment system-wide, as these have also become at their end of life cycle. And as mentioned previously, the library will be conducting a space optimization review of our South Fletcher's branch. So, as you know from previous presentations, and as J. Paul has alluded to already, Brampton Library prides itself in being an exceptionally efficient and effective organization in comparison to other library systems across Canada by doing more with less. And we are happy to acknowledge that E&Y has validated this in their report. And finally, we are pleased to share that the Honorable Lisa MacLeod, Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture Industries, presented Brampton Library with its Minister's Award for Innovation for removing barriers to children's materials. And we are particularly proud of this initiative as it removes barriers to access by eliminating fines on most of our children's materials, thereby supporting children and families both in school readiness and future academic success.
And so we appreciate all the support we've received through staff and through council, through your guidance to help us develop this budget. We believe we have aligned the resources that we're requesting with the needs of the community and the strategic priorities that you've laid out in a way that meets the needs of our community, both in the short term and in the long term. So we thank you for listening to our presentation. I always like to add at the end here just a little personal story to connect, because it's wonderful to talk, as Councillor Bowman mentioned earlier. It's always good to have numbers, but I think it's more powerful when we can connect it even to people. And in this case, we always like to end our presentation with a conversation about at least one of our users. And in this case, I want to introduce you to Meg. Meg Rathode is a fourth-year student at McMaster University. He's studying integrated science with a biology concentration. I don't even understand what that means. But what I do understand, he also plays on the rugby team, which I highly respect. He just returned from the 2019 Amgen Scholars Canada program, a 10-week research placement that offers undergraduates the opportunity to engage in cutting-edge research, mentored by some of University of Toronto's world-renowned scientists. Meg graduated from Turner Fenton Secondary School and was born and raised in Brampton. This is the type of person that we want to be putting out of Brampton, someone who's going to be a leader, someone who's going to be pushing the boundaries of what his area of knowledge is, someone who's going to make a real contribution to Canadian life. This is a person who we should be proud of. This is the kind of person, when we talk about the other investments and strategic priorities in our community, whether we're talking about universities or healthcare, is the kind of person that we want to keep in this community. And when we talk to a person like Meg, Meg tells us, Brampton Library helped me jumpstart my career in academics. Just walking through the doors of my favorite Chinguacousy branch gets me motivated and ready to learn. It's great that libraries are expanding what they offer, but I appreciate the space for quiet study. After-hour study halls are a great idea. They give me more time in the place that I love to be. So when we think about the future of our community, we think about the future of our country and who we're putting out there, it's lovely to think that those people start off in the Brampton Library. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the presentation. I see two questions. Councillor Singh, and then we'll go to Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on behalf of myself and Councillor Williams, as we both sit on the board, you truly do a lot with little, and the numbers prove it. The audit proved it as well, and it's a testament to how well the libraries run, and we look forward to seeing what we do in 2020 as well. But you run a great operation, and I just had one quick question. The extended hours, what time do they currently go until, or during study time?
We currently offer it at 3 locations, and it runs Saturdays and Sundays after we close at 6, so 6 to 10.
6 to 10, okay. And so I know many people in my area, a lot of the residents, they're a younger population, a lot of students, and they've benefited and appreciated the extended hours. So we'll see what else we could do to help some of those students out, because there's a lack of study space. It comes back to lack of a university as well. But there's lack of study space here. It's a high need, and we'll look forward to seeing what else we can do to help our students as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Just quickly through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jay Paul. Thank you, Susan, for coming in. You know that we're big supporters, both Councillor Pelleshi and I, of the libraries. I mean, actually, last term, I think there was 3 libraries got started or finished in that last term of council, and one of them was in our ward, which was nice to see that open finally.
We know, Councillor Pelleshi, it's already too small.
It seems like everywhere I go, when I run into people, whether it's at AMO or various conferences that we go to, Brampton Library's name comes up. So you must be doing something right with the little funding you do get. It's nice to see that and Rebecca's name did come up when I was at the Global Covenant of Mayors. She's well respected by the Hamilton folks and even the Burlington folks. So it was sad to see her leave. I'm hoping she's enjoying her retirement. But no, thank you again for coming in and presenting once again.
Thank you for support, and thank you for serving on our board as well in the past.
It was enjoyable. Thank you.
We're good.
Okay, thank you so much for the presentation, and we're grateful for the incredible work you're doing. I love seeing these partnerships in the community, the early on center, bringing people together for multiple purposes. It's just a great format, and we're really excited to continue to support your growth. We're a growing community, and we know that gives increased responsibilities to you, but the library is at the heart of any community. I remember growing up, my mother taking me to the library on a regular basis, and it's part of everyone's childhood and life, and we want to keep it, maintain this quality of life for future residents in Brampton. So thank you for your work.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And, a motion to receive, moved by Councillor Williams, seconded by Councillor Medeiros. All those in favor, motion carries. Now, Council, we're at 8:57. Our goal was to have these presentations between 7 and 9, and then we move back into council. We have correspondence I'd like us to receive from Louis Cadeau, Iwa Maleskoa, Donna Lavins Van West, Cindy Evans, and Peter Bolton. Can I have a motion to receive the correspondence? Motion carries. And now we have a public question period before we have the recess. Is that correct? Okay, we have an opportunity for a public question period. Does anyone watching today want to come forward and ask a question? Seeing none, we're returning tomorrow. Charlotte, the time again that we start tomorrow? 1 p.m. We return tomorrow at 1 p.m. for another edition of City of Brampton Budget Committee. Thank you for participating. Thank you for caring about your city. And to council members, I'm going to check with the clerk how long she needs before we return in camera. 10 minutes. So in 10 minutes, we'll into the committee room. Okay, thank you. And we can leave our stuff here.